Hi, I'm Sahana,
I'm Meghana, and this is Shankari.
our co-host and co-producer, and today we're going to be discussing the book Sweet Bean Paste by Durian Sukegawa.
Okay,
So, do you
so
want to give them a plot rundown of what this is about?
yeah, sure. So this book, I actually did not read until recently, and Sahana had read it earlier, and then she kept like nagging me to read it, and then I finally read it, and it was actually so good. But it's essentially about this man. His name is Sentaro, and he is a released criminal, and he's working at a dorayaki shop, making basically what is like dorayaki, which is a
Sweet
Japanese
bean
like
paste.
sweet. It's like sweet
Sweet
bean
bean paste.
paste against like two, what is it, pancakes?
Yeah, it's like rice cakes
Hmm.
in rice cake stuffed with sweet bean paste.
Yeah.
Yes.
So basically, that's what he's making at the shop, and he's doing it to pay off his debts to the owner's wife. He kind of just goes through the motions of life. He doesn't like live life to the fullest because for him, it's just about like earning money, paying off his debts, and then like going on from there. So he is looking for like a new employee to help him out in the shop, and the person that comes in is this old lady named Tokue. And at first he's like really reluctant to hire her because not only is she old, she has like kind of like curled fingers, and he's like, how's she gonna work with those,
Mm-hmm.
But then he eventually convinces him by bringing him like a sample of her own bean paste, and he tastes it, and it's so amazing and beautiful that he's like, okay, I guess I will hire you for sales to rise so I can finally pay off my debt. And though it starts off with a selfish reason, their friendship essentially blossoms. In a way that they are similar because they're both seen as like outcasts of society because he is a criminal and she actually had a disease that put her at the edge of society. And eventually they make friends with this high schooler named Wakana, who's also in a way a social outcast due to the fact that she attends school part-time because she has to make money for her family. These three of them form like an odd little trio, and they kind of like go through life. And he eventually, like Sentara eventually learns that you don't have to do anything special to make life meaningful to you. Like just living it, just being aware of the things around you, just drinking in every single moment, every single day, that can be enough.
Yeah, so the disease that Tokue has in this book is actually leprosy or Hansen's disease, and the CDC defines it as like a disease that causes physical deformity. Although it is curable if it's treated within a short period of time, individuals who had the disease faced a lot of discrimination purely due to the fact that they thought it was highly contagious and it caused this like severe physical deformity that was like frightening to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And like society always ostracizes people it sees as other. So Tokuya has this disease, and that's why her hand is curled up and disfigured. And initially, Sentaro does judge her for this. However, this like changes after a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Like in the book, he does like reject her at first because he's kind of like, how can she work with these curled fingers? But then after she brings him this beautiful bean paste and he gets to know her better, he sees like her story as like somebody who has like grown up in basically when she was a teenage girl, she was brought to a sanatorium, I think,
Mm-hmm.
where like essentially she was isolated from the rest of society so that society wouldn't get the disease. She was taken from her family. Her mother gave her like a knit sweater, I think,
Mm-hmm.
and they ripped that from her, saying that she could only wear what was given to her in the hospital. So she was essentially like isolated from society at like a very young age. And when Sentaro like grows to like learn her story, he learns that like she was actually part of this thing called the confectioners group within her
The
sanatorium.
Because the sanatorium it essentially existed to all like Hansen's disease patients or people with leprosy would be like sectioned off from the rest of
Yeah.
society. So they formed their own little community, and part of that was the confectioners group.
And she would work to make confections and like other sweets and pastries in that group, which is how she ended up making like dorayaki. And it's not just her, like other ladies and men in that group also were part of that confectioners group where they would all make things together, and they were kind of like their own little community in society. What I found like super interesting about this book is that it addressed that even after like the law was passed, in that like people were like, the law was passed saying that like Hansen's disease patients could like go out freely in the public and that the disease wasn't like extremely contagious. um the patients of the disease, or like those who suffered with the disease, found it really hard to like go back into society again because most of their family members were dead. And
They've been
people,
isolated for
yeah,
so long that they didn't know how to go back. Like,
exactly, it was kind of just like super unfamiliar environment. And for Tokue, she says that like she always like hated a part of herself for not being able to work in society and not being able to contribute in a what she sees a productive way to society. She thought like, oh, I haven't worked a day in my life, I haven't contributed to the world around me, like
Mhm.
how can I go join this world? And that's when like she kind of realizes that like she doesn't need to like do anything to be special or to take part in the world, because all the world wants for you is for you to experience it and to listen.
Mhm. And then another really interesting arc in the story is the main character's relationship with Doriaki and how he wants to make salty Doriaki. Because initially he doesn't even like Doriaki, even though that's the food he's making. He mentions how he can never even eat a whole Doriaki because it's too sweet for him. So Tokoi mentions, she's like, hey, what if you added something a little salty to the Doriaki? Wouldn't you be able to eat it then? Then it wouldn't be like cloyingly sweet. And he's like, that's an incredible idea. I'm going to try it. So he keeps trying to make salty dorayaki, but he's unable to succeed because the dorayaki keeps having this like bitter aftertaste that he can't get out. So this like downfall parallels how he's having like a deteriorating relationship with the initial owner of the shop's wife, because his debt is owed to the owner of the shop. So he feels like he has an allegiance to the shop and he has to continue working for the owner's, like the deceased owner's wife, right? But then eventually, like the wife sees that his work is just not going anywhere, and she's like, I don't think we should continue making dorayaki. It isn't successful anymore. We should focus on selling other things. And he ends up quitting, and he's at a really low point in his life. But then he sees Tokue in his dream, and Tokue tells him, try adding cherry blossom petals to the dorayaki. And then and it'll taste like slightly sweet. And he decides to do this, and like that arc, I feel like it really represents like not giving up on something, even though the owner shunned him for like not making dorayaki the regular way, for not switching to new products. He stuck with the dorayaki because that's what he wanted to do. Even though initially in the story he felt aimless and he was only doing it because he didn't know how to do anything else. But at the end of the story, he had this like commitment to this food, and I thought that was really beautiful.
I thought what was like one of the most like amazing things about the story was that Toge kind of served as Sentaro's teacher when he was making the dorayaki, because he wanted to like learn how to make the dorayaki from her because he didn't want it to like work like super long hours in the shop.
Yeah.
So then there's a part in the book where the owner basically tells Sentaro that he has to get rid of Tokue because she still has like that outdated view of like leprosy being like a contagious disease, and that customers may like shy away from the shop if they learn that Tokue has leprosy. And so even though Tokyo is like completely cured, Sentaro still like is forced to like send her away, and he's worried. He's like, when will I ever learn to make the bean paste? And in his heart, he's sad that he loses Tokue as a friend. But Tokue is like, what makes a bean paste so special is that the creator is able to put like a part of themselves inside of it. And what he learns from Tokue is that when she's making the bean paste, she does this thing where like she leans over the pot and she like listens to the beans, and he's like, what does that even mean? Like, what do you mean you're listening to the beans?
Like, what is
like,
that?
are the beans talking or something? Like, what are you talking about? And even like Tokue's friends in the Sanatorium think she's a little weird because they're like, what do you mean you're listening to the beans? Because like it wasn't just the beans. She would say like, listen to the trees and the clouds and like those around you, you know. And everyone thought she was like absolutely insane. But then Sentaro, like even Tokue herself admits like, I was never able to hear the beans, but like because I live in like the idea that if I try hard enough, I will. Like I feel like that, like caring about the beans, like asking about their journey from as they got to the foreign lands to here when they were exported from the foreign land to Japan. Like when I ask them about that, it makes like the beans want to be part of the bean paste, and it makes them want to incorporate themselves better. And so Sentaro kind of like gains this like awareness for the world where he's like paying attention to like even like the small things and like listening to beans evolve.
Yeah. Like I think that's a recurring theme throughout the book. Like from how he's like educated about leprosy patients to how he learns to follow his own path in life. He needs to start like he starts like becoming more aware, like this awareness for things around him, like starting to listen to the things around him, because if you listen, you might hear something of meaning. And I feel like that's one of the biggest takeaways from the book.
Of course. And like I also thought like it was interesting how it touched on the theme of like outcasts. Like we revisit this theme again of like Sentaro being like a released criminal, and then Tokue being like the person that like suffered through a disease and was discriminated against her, like discrimination against her because of that. And then Wakana obviously like her having to work part-time in order to support her family because her dad's dead, and she can only come to school part-time. Like those all make them like kind of like outcasts of society. Where like some in like I guess Wakana's case, she's not like outwardly like bullied against, but she doesn't have like they're kind of like alone.
Yeah.
And I remember one line in the book where Tokyo says like, "What made me want to work at your shop wasn't the fact that I loved making bean paste or that I knew that it was really good, but when I looked into your eyes," she's talking about Sentaro, when she's like, "I looked into your eyes, I was like, why does this man have such sad eyes?" And she comes in because she wants to know the answer and she wants to like make him feel like a little bit of happiness.
Yeah, like it's so interesting. Like these people, even though they have other people in their lives, they just feel so deeply alone. But like it doesn't mean that they can't find refuge in one another. And they form this unlikely trio because of their like willingness to find this like sense of home and friendship in one another that they couldn't find elsewhere.
I feel like in a way it like makes them all like so much like stronger. Like they gain a sense of like identity. Like this is who I am. This is for Sentaro. It's like this is why I'm making dorayaki. You know. And for Tokyo, it's like I remember again like when she's writing the letter to him, and then she's like, "You, if I had a son, he would have been your age." Like she kind of considers Sentaro as her son.
Yeah.
Like that just. Yeah. I think that like broke my heart. Yeah. But you know,
it was like it's such a beautiful
book. Yeah.
It really goes into like it brings awareness to you as well. Like just how Sentaro's learning to listen to things around him. You feel these new perspectives in this book that you wouldn't have gained otherwise, and you're like, what if I tried listening more? What if I tried to seek out books with
what if
more...
I tried like seeing if my beans can talk whenever I make my food? It's kind of like whenever you do a craft, you have to put your everything into that craft. Like you have to like find your own meaning in the craft. Otherwise it kind of becomes like mundane.
Yeah, like as an artist, as a writer, as a student, educator, whatever you are, like put yourself into the craft that you're doing. Listen to the craft that you're doing and do what it like tells you to do. And I think that is one of the biggest things about this book.
So 100% read this book if you're looking for something like touching and make you want to like see the world around you in like a new light. Definitely read this book. It made me like so like reflective and thoughtful at the end of it. Yeah. So definitely get this book.
Yeah, totally recommend.
Yeah. Did you see something in the camera?
I know. No, there's something.
Wait, I think there's something in the camera.
I'll like check it out.
Yeah, let me check.